Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Aruma Hayes, and I am thrilled to be joined today by a true legend in the accounting profession, Barry Melancon. Barry served as president and CEO of the AICPA for over 30 years, and he's been a driving force behind innovation, global integration, and governance in our field. So, like I said, I'm your host for today and the CEO of Hayes CPA LLC, a New York City minority-owned business. And I am an avid volunteer. I serve on the New York CPA board. I'm a regional vice president with NABA Inc., and I am the immediate past chair of the AICPA's Private Companies Practice Section Executive Committee. So let me tell you a quick fun fact about myself. In 1996, I was an actor in the movie. Well, not really, but I was in the Birdcage. So if you remember it, this is a very old movie. It had Robin Williams, Netta Lynn, and Gene Hackman. I was an extra, so I was on the scene way in the background. I was on the beach scene and then a couple of scenes in a nightclub. And then my other claim to fame is when I was on the AICPA town hall with our guest for today with Barry Melancon. This was almost 2 years ago, in August, 2 years ago. So that was a great session for me. So I was glad to have had that occasion. But well, today's conversation is especially for you all. Accounting students, recent grads, early career professionals, mid-career professionals, whether you're studying for the CPA exam, navigating your first job, or thinking about your career growth. This session is going to be packed with insights for you to help you grow and thrive in the profession. So I'm really honored to welcome Barry Melancon today. He is a transformative leader in our profession. At just the early age of 37 years old, Barry became the youngest person ever to serve as president and CEO of AICPA. Over the next 3 decades, he led both the AICPA and Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, guiding the profession through groundbreaking advancements in a number of areas. So under his leadership, the AICPA grew into the world's largest accounting body, representing nearly 600,000 professionals across 188 countries. Imagine that. So his accomplishments range from launching CPA.com to shaping global sustainability standards. He's just been an awesome trailblazer in our profession. His contributions have earned him numerous accolades, including repeated recognition by Accounting Today as one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting, and Forbes' first ever Lifetime Achievement Award in 2024 last year. Today, he serves as a global leader on several national and international boards, helping to continue to shape the future of the profession. So what can I say? Barry's vision it's left a great legacy on our profession. I'm really excited that we're going to learn from him today. So before we dive into the conversation today, Barry, I always love for our audience to get to know our guests a little better. So can you share a little fun fact or something personal that most people might not know about you?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm glad to share something, but it's a real treat to be with you. We've had a long relationship. You have been that consummate volunteer at all the different levels, and volunteerism inside the profession, any profession, but clearly our profession is absolutely essential. And you sort of stumbled on that acronym PCPS, Private Companies Practice Section. But that is the group of firms, the relatively smaller firms in our profession, and it's about how we provide services to those firms. And the reality is that we are a profession that has a significant number in this country of smaller firms, some more than 40,000, and that was a really important role and that you had, and you did a marvelous job with that.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And you've heard me say this. The reality is that during my 30 years as CEO of the AICPA, there were more than 20,000 people who volunteered on various committees and programs and things of that nature. And that is a huge strength of our profession. And I was actually talking to a firm CEO earlier today, and he was talking about wanting to do something with a couple other firms and sharing some information. And basically, he said, our profession is known for sharing among practitioners, particularly, and he was just sort of living that value. As it relates to me, I mean, I have been a world traveler, and so I've been to more than 30 different countries. I've been to every state, a minimum for the profession, a minimum of 5 times, with the exception of Alaska, where I was only there twice. But all the rest. So, I have been sort of in every corner with prime ministers and executives, presidents of the United States, leaders in various countries. And so that's been a great honor to represent the profession in that space. I do things too, and I'm a big sports fan, a big college football fan, a college baseball fan. I do some boating, which I like to do, and I do play some golf. Although in the last several years, really coming out of COVID, the amount of golf that I played was really reduced, and that is reflective in how well have been playing golf. So not very positively there. And I guess the other thing, and I'm very proud of my heritage. I know you're very proud of your heritage. Um, I grew up in a very rural place in South Louisiana. I grew up about an hour and a half from New Orleans, basically where the BP oil spill was more than a decade ago, along the shores of our country in the southern part of the United States, and that's where I grew up, and in uh, a very rural area. My father was only sixth grade educated, and so it was a, a wonderful upbringing, and one that I think demonstrates how you can be very successful in this profession from coming from that standpoint to get the opportunities that I did have.
So talking about, I mean, I have so many questions for you. I'm like, I wanted to jump into the airports because I heard you tell a story once about how you never get to arrive. Either you don't arrive early or you walk around and you make sure you don't go to the business lounge. And I said, that's a tip I need to take from you because I'm like, I'm putting on some extra pounds here and there. So I'm like, I need to take some tips from you on that. But
Yeah.
talking about growing up in Louisiana, so when did you know that you wanted to become an accountant and then become a CPA? Like, how did you make that transition?
Yeah. Just real quick on the airports, I rarely go into lounges. If I got a really long overlay and I need to eat, I'll go into a lounge. But I love watching people, particularly people around the world, and how they function in family units or in friendships, and how they interact or how they don't interact. It's To me, there's a study in that. The honest answer on the accounting side is I went to a very small school in South Louisiana, about 10 miles from where I grew up, Nichols State University, about 6,000 people. It's a regional university in the system. And I talked to them. In all honesty, it didn't have a law school where I went, but in a pre-law mode, and intending to have a minor in business. And with that first semester, I did take accounting, and I made this decision after the first semester to change the major to accounting, and it really was my logic of saying if I want to be a lawyer, which I never became a lawyer, that the business background was going to be very important to that anyway, and accounting was the most well-rounded curriculum that you could take um, from a business discipline perspective, and that's really what drove my decision making. Um, and I would say probably 2 years into that is when I said, I really want to, sort of go into accounting more directly, and probably not go to law school. And that's where it led me to learn a lot about the CPA profession.
Awesome. By the way, folks, if you have, feel free to use the chat feature. Place your comments in the chat box. Ask your questions. Of Barry is here. We're here to learn from him. He has a lot of things to share with us. So continue with your journey with the accounting and CPA profession. So you also became a partner your local firm. Did you know once you started? Did you have an idea of how long it was going to take for you to become a partner? Was that part of a grand plan that you have? Because one of the questions we always get when you go for interviews, like, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? And all of that stuff. Like, did you have all your path charted out?
Yeah, I have to, admit I did. I'm a pretty much a goal-oriented person. And what I was going to do is very important. To be honest, I finished college in 3.5 years. I had finished high school and skipping a year. So I was very young coming out of college. And I was getting married. And the decision I made, my wife and I, we were gonna move to Houston, which was about 6 hours from where I grew up, and um, that was the big city. And to be honest, I was offered in my hometown, which was a town of well under 100,000 people, more probably closer to 50,000 people at that time, um, with a local firm that had just been created, partners split off from another local firm. And they offered me the same money that much larger firms in Houston were offering. And so I decided to stay home under the sort of the notion that you could always leave. Although, as we do know, once you set roots into certain things, it is harder to leave, although I ultimately did. But I was very fortunate that the partners in that firm, two originally, and then a third that was later added before I became partner, they were all very goal-oriented people. And one particularly, I always remember this. We were working on a largest client that had passed away that was an estate tax work at that point. I was an audit person, but they asked me to work on it because of the importance of it. And he on the way to go meet with the family after the person had passed away, he drove me by his house and he said, look, this is my house and we're building a pool. And that was a goal that I had, to be able to have a pool in my yard. And he says, it's very important that you write down goals. And I took that very seriously. I was just few months into with the firm, and I began writing down goals, and I did write down a goal that I wanted to be partner by 25, and I did make that. There was some hurdles along that way, but I had opportunities to leave, and that goal kept me there because I really wanted to be a partner by 25 in the firm, and the firm knew it. The partners in the firm knew it, and I did make it by 25, and that was sort of a driving force to me in how I went about what I learned and how I did it, and how hard I worked, and what I wanted to achieve. So I had a lot of other written goals, but that sort of ties directly to your question.
Yeah, I mean the power of writing down goals. I mean, I hear stories about this all the time, and it's also happened to me in my own life. When I have make plans and I don't make them concrete and write them down, sometimes they materialize, sometimes they don't. But it's like write it down, focus on it, and it's sure and work on it is sure to materialize. But that is awesome. Partner at 25, at 37, CEO of AICPA. Can you share some of the early challenges that you faced and how did what you did? What helped you to be successful, super successful at that early age?
Well, roommate, I think confidence is a big part of people's success. I think confidence sometimes is ill applied. You make mistakes with confidence, frankly, but you have to be willing to make mistakes, and you have to learn from those mistakes, and you have to face challenges head on. And I did all of those things. Um, you know, I was at the firm that we were talking about for about 9 months, and I had a client offer me a job at a considerable amount more money than what I was making. Now, the money wasn't nearly as big back then in that period of time as it later became, but it was almost 100%. It was about an 80% increase in pay, which was a lot of increase. And I had the confidence to walk down the hall and speak to the managing partner and say, "Hey, I've got this offer and I'd like to speak to you about it. And a lot of people wouldn't have that confidence. I wasn't afraid of the reaction that I was going to get, or I felt I could handle the reaction I was going to get. And the two founding partners of the firm, they said, let's go to lunch. We had a 2.5 hour lunch, and they basically they did a marvelous job. They painted a picture to me of what partnership was like. Basically, they told me how much money they made and what the expectations were. And I think more firms need to do that type of thing today, by the way, with young people. Um, and I tell that to CEOs all the time. But they painted a picture in which I didn't want to leave, not because of you know my love for the firm or whatever, but because it was a goal that I had, and they painted a picture for me that I didn't ever want to have lived my life and said I didn't get to experience what a partnership was like, being a partner was like in a smaller firm. And so I turned down that offer, and I did. They lived up to everything they said, and I lived up to everything I said, and made partner in that environment. So, that was a hurdle. My career would have taken a much different direction had I made that decision. Who knows what it'd have been? But, so I think confidence is a very important part. And I think the goals that we just talked about are very important parts. But, you have failings. As CEO of the AICPA, in my first basically 4 years, we had Enron and WorldCom. I was, very young still. I was under 40. Really challenging times. The ultimate failure of Arthur Andersen as a firm, criticism of the profession, uh, testifying multiple times before Congress at that point, being challenged by regulators and people who were in positions of authority and the government, and having the confidence to push back. And in those processes, no one would ever do all of those things. Being in front of the media and on television a lot, no one would ever do all of those things 100% correct. That's an impossible objective. And so you have to accept the fact that you are doing things and you're not going to be 100% perfect, as you in retrospect would like to be. But you learn from those experiences. It's just like working on an engagement. You're going to get review notes from a partner. You're not going to have everything right in that particular environment. And it's not a personal attack, but it's how you learn. And in leadership positions, it's also how you deal with people and how you pick the right people to be around you, and how you instill confidence in them, and how you coach them. And all of those things are part of a maturation process that's really critical. And the ultimate, back to your original question, it's the willingness to change and learn. It's the confidence in what you believe, but also, the notion that you're not going to always be 100% correct. You're not going to always hire the correct person. You're not going to always do and say the exact best thing. Or when you have competing priorities, you aren't even going to always pick the right one. But you have to have a notion of what you're trying to do. So I'll close with saying that I think you also have to have passion. You have to have passion for what you're trying to do, because passion will help you overcome it, and passion will also drive you to having a vision of what you're trying to achieve. And when I first became CEO, I knew the profession needed to change, and I knew I'd be criticized for that, because a lot of sort of changes were foreign for some people who had long been in the profession. But I think we gave permission to the profession to change and find its way. And I'm pretty proud of the way the profession evolved in that process. But of course, we didn't get everything right.
Yeah, great feedback. So confidence, willingness to change, and passion for the profession. I love those things. But before I move on with my questions, I know we have a question from one of our audience members. I would like to ask whether this major, I believe is talking about accounting, is still worth continuing to study in today's economic downtown and with artificial intelligence in the future. What would you say, Barry?
Well, let me just say the questioner asked the absolutely wrong person if they wanted to hear from me that it's not the right major. So let me tell you why I absolutely believe it's critical, and it's a great question. Um, the reality is that we as a profession are very important to the success of humankind and business the business community and the public sector. We live in a world that is highly complex and unpredictable. And I know the essence of the question is, well, technology is changing the profession and artificial intelligence is changing, so many things. So the reality is artificial intelligence is changing virtually everything in society. But the uncertainty and the complexity of the world combined with how people trust us is a remarkable combination and a remarkable tribute to the men and women who have been in this profession. And the world and business people and individuals, if we're advising individuals, they need places to trust. And the world doesn't have a lot of places to trust. And the complexity makes that even more so, frankly. It exacerbates the notion of the lack of trust. And so as the world sorts itself out, and it's always had to sort itself out, it's just doing it at a lot faster pace with a lot more points of influence with technology and things than ever before. But as the world sorts itself out and people make decisions about their lives and their businesses and their financial health, and sometimes the personal things where we're trusted with our clients or our employers, um, I think we're needed probably more than ever. And also, when you think about that fast pace and complexity, not only we need it from the trust perspective, but people rely, how our economies evolve. If you take our core service, the audit as an example, it's not highly visible, but it's highly relied upon as to sort of a point in the economy or in the world where people look to have confidence to do things and make investments. And so it is a great career. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to look like my career or Rumi, your career.
Mhm.
What we do and what we expect from young people is going to be much different. What we expect from universities to prepare young people is going to be much different. The need to change in one's career if you're entering the profession today is going to be much greater than it was from people 50, 60, 70 years ago or even 30 years ago. And so all of those things are true, but they're true about all professions. And I just think we're needed. I think we are needed to help the world and the peoples of the world and the businesses of the world to evolve today. And I think that will play out very strongly.
I agree completely. I think our profession isn't going anywhere, and the difference. I think it's to students. I would say, learn how to use technology and AI to make your job better, because it's you're just going to be able to, you don't want to be sitting at the desk and doing everything. You can do the work with technology, leveraging technology and AI. You can do the work in half the time, but knowing how to use it properly, not using it the wrong way. That's the key. But talking continue the discussion along your leadership journey and career and whatnot. So there, some folks who are struggling, they would like to go walk along that leadership path, but they might be struggling. They're like, so some folks, sometimes I hear folks that like, oh, I can't volunteer for this leadership role. I can't do this because I've got to have billable hours. I've got to work. I've got to do this. Like, what kind of advice would you give to young professionals who want to go, walk down that leadership path, but they're struggling with making it there?
Well, every circumstance or employment situation is different, but I would start with, you have to articulate that to your supervisors, the people who are going to evaluate you. You have to. Almost every employer and every system is going to ask people to write down goals. As we started this conversation with, you ought to write that down in the goal, is that you want to be a leader or you want to be involved in the profession in a volunteer way, or in society, or in organizations that make a difference, and you want to be supported in that as part of your development as a young professional or a young person entering the profession. It's fine to do that. Now, your employer may ask you to dial that in a certain way to balance some of the things that you asked in the question about how productive and all of those things. They may ask you to make certain sacrifices. You have to do some of that on your own time. I can't 100% support your ideals in that environment. All of those things, I think, are part of it. And maybe you have to make commitments in a different way. Don't worry, supervisor, boss, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to get my job done. I'm going to deliver on my accountabilities, but I also need to be able to do some of these things during the workday or whatever the case may be. I think people react. I think supervisors react very positively to that. And I think organizations want people like that. But you have to have that, sometimes you have to start that. Sometimes you have to start that conversation, or have ideals and plans that relate to that particular environment. And some of that inside the profession, you have to be willing to see how that can play well in back into the firm, if you work in the firm or the corporation and the finance function, the networking that comes beyond, from that, and bring that back into the organization. So you just have to be, I think, willing to have that type of conversation. And, to be honest and fair, you're not going to always find somebody receptive to that. And the first lack of receptivity doesn't mean you quit. Doesn't mean you quit the job. Doesn't mean you quit trying. I think you have to continue to raise those issues or make that point, and maybe turn to people that you interact with who are doing those things or who are advancing, and ask them for help, and in creating that particular environment, and take on responsibility, and not just be the type of person who just does what they're told, but have the conversation with, again, in an evaluation. And everybody is evaluated increasingly today in firms, evaluated much more frequently than, say, when I came about. But have that conversation as part of that process. Everybody I know, when they're doing an evaluation of someone who reports to them, will at some point say, is there anything you want to discuss with me? Or is there anything you have a concern with? Or do you want to raise any particular points? And take advantage of that. And I think that is very important. And I think also, as you progress, because it's not just about very early in career, it's about later in career as well.
Mhm.
I think seek out things to make you better. I'm a big believer. I still have an executive coach, even though I'm in a totally different world. Um, I think coaching and getting coaching and having the ability to get input from people about where your strengths and weaknesses are, how you can do things better, is a gift. One of our past chairs of the AICPA used to always use this term. His name was Rich Catalano. Um, the gift of feedback. Think about feedback as a gift, and constructive feedback. And I remember one time, he said to me, he said, you are. He said this as a positive. When someone on your team is doing something that they could be doing better, I see you pull them on the side immediately to give them feedback in real time. And he paid that as a compliment. He said, but I wonder, he asked it as a question, I wonder if you do that as well on the positive side. Now, I thought I did, but it was a reflective point to make sure that I had balance in that particular space. And so I think feedback is a constant, and improvement is a constant notion. And sometimes people think of it as negative, and just think of feedback as this gift, as this incredibly powerful thing that someone else is investing in you. Their most treasured asset is their time, and they're taking some of their time to share feedback with you to make you better. That's a huge gift. And so I think if you think about it from that standpoint, that it's a very positive part of your leadership development process.
Oh yeah, I love feedback. I love to receive feedback. I love to give feedback. And I sometimes I ask for feedback. Anyone who's willing to share, I'm like, yes, give. I love to get constructive feedback. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, we speak about the executive having an executive coach. So sometimes we think that we are okay with maybe having a mentor or maybe having a sponsor, but that executive coach or career coach is also important. Would you also encourage, because not everybody works in a big firm where, because I know some firms provide either sponsors or mentors, or some associations provide mentors or sponsors. Is it also, do you think it's a recommendation for one to maybe invest in a career coach or an executive coach as well? Or, go seek out your own sponsor if you don't have one that's readily available within your firm or an associate, your CPA association society.
I don't think there's a set way of doing this. There's no like this is not like an accounting standard that there's only one way of doing something, and even hopefully accounting standards aren't only one way to do anything. But I think all of those things that you said could be a path. Like for instance, if you're a sole proprietor, maybe you network with two or three other sole proprietors, and you sort of agree to be each other's coach and to be a sounding board, and maybe have three in each other, to give feedback. If I was a partner in a four-partner firm, so it's not like I was in a big firm, but I would, if I was in a small firm today, having experienced what I experienced, I would be a champion for us as a firm investing in executive third-party coaching for our leaders, not just our partners, but our partners that to be, the people that we want to be future partners in the firm or future owners of the firm, however you want to describe them. I think that's a huge investment. It's money out of your pocket, but it pays such dividends. And I think when you have a coach like that, and let's say you're in a firm or you're in a company, I think it's going to make money in your environment. It's going to make money in the company, or it's going to make money in the firm because of what people can bring to you. Outside perspective is very, very valuable. And without the sort of the the boss subordinate or subordinate boss relationship, that sort of third party type of activity, I think is really, really important. And I acknowledge not everybody can afford that, or not everybody's in a company that invests in that. But then you can seek it out. You can seek it out in your firm, maybe with somebody who's in an area that you don't ever do any work with. And you have lunch once a month or something along those lines. I think there are ways to get to that particular point, and you have to be innovative because not every entity is going to invest in that. Although I do think more are today than they were 20 years ago, and I do think it pays a big dividend. And to see our weaknesses or places to improve, we can put it in a positive. I think is a very important point. And I think you want somebody that is going to be hard on you. You don't want somebody to just pat you on the back and say, "Oh, Rume, you're fantastic. You are fantastic, Rume." But maybe if I only told you that, that's not as important as if I told you some things that you can actually work on to improve. And that is a critical component, and not to have a thin skin on those particular elements.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say for students, right, that they could begin to get some of exposure to some of these things through by participating in their accounting club on campus, and interacting, and seeking out their professors and things of that nature, right? Yeah. So we
Or a
have
former a
said
former professor who taught you a semester ago or a year ago,
uh
hey, do you mind for the next year if I visit you 4 times and you see
yes.
how I'm, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I still get emails and communications from some of my former students, whether by email or on LinkedIn. They send me messages. I just got an update from one of my former students who told me that she has a great job on Staten Island, and I'm like, I'm so proud of you. That's great. You're an accountant. It's like when you see them actually doing the work, it's like great. But here we have a question from John, and it says, "What is one trait or one skill or trait you wish you'd mastered earlier in your career to help benefit your growth in accounting?"
um, I'm a horrible proofreader. I probably should put more time into that because, in particular, in a world of text and emails and quick responses, I probably should figured out a way to put more time into that because that is a reflection on you. And sometimes I'm just trying to do things so fast. That's sort of a trivial one, but it's not so trivial as it relates to interactions with other people. Actually, and I don't know that I've ever said this publicly. In a self-evaluation, I think I could have. I leveraged the position that I was in a lot and interacted with a lot of people. But in retrospect, I could have probably even done it more. And that sort of goes back to the introvert extroverts and how much and most people think of me as an extrovert. I mean, I probably made on average 150 speeches a year. I was in every kind of environment and big staff and global and all the things we started with. But what defines you as an introvert or an extrovert is where you go to um, to rejuvenate yourself, right? And some people go to a bar or a football game or out in a restaurant with a lot of noise and people and things. And I'm more quiet, when traveling. So I like being on an airplane where I might have an hour or two to think, or being in a hotel alone in some, not your home city. But I do think that I could have probably leveraged and been a little bit more extroverted. Most people would say I'm extroverted because if I'm at a function, I'm forced myself to be extroverted. But I probably could have even been better at it and leveraged certain things, and made the time to do that in a better way. So that's 2 points. One
Yeah.
is the proofreading. One is the force yourself out of your. I did force myself out of my comfort zone, but I could have done it better, done it more.
Yeah. I like that. I think, yeah, I think we could all do a better job of that. I was a shy kid growing up. I'm like, my childhood friends, when they look at me these days, they're like, I can't believe you talk so much like you're this person. But I always try and get my students to be engaged in the classroom, to talk to it, because that skill goes a long way when you come out of your comfort zone and just engage with other professionals, with your colleagues. But talking about the classroom atmosphere, Barry, what do you think? How do you view I consider myself a lifelong learner. So how do you, because there's some students think that, hey, they have their accounting degree, that's done. Like, how do you view the importance of continuous education after that formal education ends, whether it's a bachelor's or a master's or the CPA or whatnot?
Well, it can be formal or informal education, but I think you have to, if you're going to be a professional, you have to be committed to be a lifelong learner. And I think the ability to learn in other areas, not just your own, and how to connect dots. I think one of the skill sets that we don't talk about as humans is the ability to connect dots, to understand the ramifications. It's not just the black and white. And sometimes accountants get stereotyped, sort of the blinders on, and it is or it isn't or whatever. And the notion of understanding consequences, connecting the dots, I always view one of my best skill sets was to have I have vision, I'd have where we want to go, but I was when interim steps caused you to it not to be flowing exactly the way you might have envisioned to get to the end state. I was always very comfortable with that, but in making those decisions, just making sure that there was still a path to get to where you need to go. I think, and that's a part of learning. It's like learning how to see multiple paths or multiple ways to get back on a path. I think is very, very important. And that is all about learning. That's why does someone see it another way, and asking those questions. And the last thing I would say, learning is about formal and informal, I said, and informal is about asking questions. The I learned many, many things from my executive coach, but one of the things that I learned the most of, probably, and I hope I will never forget it, is the art of asking questions rather than just having answers. Having the ability to ask questions. Why do you think it should be that way? Why does it have to be that way? Why did you make that decision? Those, how do you feel about where we are or what we're doing? How do you feel about what somebody else is doing related to you? And phrasing things in questions, it's amazing what you can get from that standpoint. And back to that earlier question, that's probably the way I should have answered that question. I wished I would have learned the skill of asking skillful questions better earlier. I think I do it decently now, and I'm always trying to improve, but it's a very powerful part for a leader and for a person who wants to constantly learn.
Yeah, absolutely great, good points about, and even interacting with clients. Sometimes you have to ask a client the same thing like 10 times, different questions, before you get the actual answer from them, because they say, "Hey, did you have any rental income?" No, and then you have to drill down 100 times before you find out. Well, they actually did get rental income, and this that. But talking about the technical,
Arumi, before you go to technical, can I tie
yeah.
it back into the question we had earlier about someone wanting to be a leader or someone wanting to be a volunteer?
Hmm.
That's a great way. The question part is a great way to handle it with your supervisor. So they're telling you certain things, et cetera. And at some point in that, let's just say you're my supervisor, and some point, Arumi, is you giving me feedback.
Hmm.
Um, if they don't give you the opportunity to make the point about building your leadership skills or being a volunteer, just think about how powerful it would be if I said, roommate, thank you for all this feedback. Would you be interested in knowing what is important to me that you didn't ask me
Awesome.
about?
Yeah.
And it's almost impossible for you to say, no, I'm not interested
Yeah.
in that, right? I mean, who's going to
Yeah.
say, no, I'm not interested? But it opens the door for you to be able to say, it's really interesting it'd be really important to me
Yeah.
if I could be on a New York State Society or
Yeah.
some other state society committee or something. That is, I think, an art and a skill that's very important.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
You want to
no,
technical.
absolutely. That was great. Because that is good. It can open up a whole new other realm. But I know some folks are scared of accounting because of that technical aspect, which is what Nathan here is saying. So if you like the fact that, hey, as an accountant, you can make good money, you could have a good job, but where do you see opportunities for creativity and innovation? If you feel that you have this creative side of you, and you want to do accounting, right? Yeah, you want to be innovative. So is there still a place for that combination in the profession?
Well, let's just pick some of the areas, right?
Right.
Um, Tax is certainly not rigid, right? There's a lot of room to be creative in creating transactions or understanding the tax law to build organizational structures, form of an entity that's going to produce different tax outcomes, dealing with multi-generational aspects. There's huge amounts of opportunity from that standpoint. On the accounting and auditing side, it's in you know helping people understand the different ways to structure transactions, do transactions, etc., business combinations. Those types of things can be tremendously creative, not in any legal sense, but within the sort of the gray areas or the parameters of the rules. If you go into financial planning, if you go into advisory, um, if you go into technology, there's just almost every one of those. You have the opportunity of really understanding what's important to a client or an employer, and then having some flexibility and understanding how to do that. I think accounting gives way more than the stereotype of accounting, way more opportunities to do those things than people may think so. Now, it is true people are attracted to accounting they like that black and white, and some people use that as a crutch. But I do think that we all, if we're going to be successful in our profession, we have to be creative into that particular area. Um, he's no longer with us; he's deceased. But the managing partner of that firm that I started with.
Hmm.
So I started in accounting and auditing. When I made partner, I changed to tax. Okay, but I was not one of these tax technical gurus. We had a tax technical guru who was phenomenal. He was phenomenal. Learned tremendous amount from him. But the managing partner of the firm would always go to the tax guru to find out what the law really said, and then he'd say he'd come to me to figure out a way around the law. So I think that points to the creative notion, and sort of it took the two of us to produce that maybe, but that was that's an example. I do think we how businesses run. Just think about AI, how you apply
Hmm.
AI.
Yeah.
Huge creativity that's going to come about from that standpoint.
Yeah. I agree. And talking about, you started at your small firm, a small firm in Louisiana. Now you are, you have this global experience, and you're serving all this global firms. So, what would you say to a young professional who wants to get some international exposure in their career and they want to go along that international path or work for a global firm?
Well, let me start with something I know you have heard me say, but I passionately believe this. Of all the professions, we are the most local, the most national, and most global of all professions. There, if you think about that in strata, the profession serves Main Street men and women, business people, individuals, etc. But the work that we do touches the largest national companies in the world. We serve the capital markets of our country, the economy of our country. That's a national footprint. And almost any size business today, and we could talk about tariffs as an example that have huge ramifications to almost any type of business today. Even small business has it's highly unusual that they have zero, global implications, whether it's supply chain, COVID taught us that, or whether it's sales processes. Yes, you can find the local restaurant maybe isn't going to have the global, but there is going to be a significant amount of opportunity from a global perspective. And then I would say philosophically, and we're in a political environment in which there's a lot of debate about how we evolve politically. There are wars going on. There is foreign policy that people differ on and have differed from administration to administration. And I think you learn from those types of things back to our learning. There's not just one simple answer to these types of environments, but every one of those elements is about how our economy, which is the largest economy in the world, if you're just focusing on the US, it's the largest economy in the world. It has huge impact to economies around the world, either positive or negative, and understanding that from just a practical, not the the nitty gritty of treaties and tariffs and all of those things, but the understanding that from being a CPA and how that impacts businesses and customers of businesses and all of those types of things is critically important. And what we do and how we do it as a country, we need to understand we have a huge implication to the rest of the world. And so I think there is a global element in our profession, much more so than the other professions. Um, and I think that it touches all different types of entities. And I will tell you, I was in this small firm, and it was in South Louisiana. Well, one of the things in South Louisiana is oil and gas. One of the things that oil and gas has is a global nature to it. And so there was a lot of elements for me to be exposed to that, and a lot of tax. I was even very early in my career an expert witness in a tax case related to global tax. And so I think there's tremendous amounts of opportunities in that space. Now, it is true that you might have to raise your hand or you might have to say, again, in your evaluation, look, I have an interest in global. If you're in a bigger enterprise, that may mean being able to work globally or work on clients that are coming from out. Or maybe it means I want to work for a company or a firm that has a strong global network. I'm sharing a global network today, and their staff is going to have different opportunities than firms that are not. But if you look at any of, let's say, the top probably 300 or 400 firms from a size perspective, they're all going to have some kind of global network activity that they have because they have clients that are in that space. And in smaller firms, it may be less frequent, and they may not be in a global network, but they may need answers at a certain period of time, and they'll have those opportunities that'll come about because if you can't answer those questions for a client, you're probably going to lose that client. And so I think that sort of plays into the environment of what even smaller firms are doing in that space. I'll tell you a real quick story. I was in a Midwestern
Mhm.
state. I won't tell the state. Uh, and I was speaking about certain international issues that were really important to the profession. And I spoke, and then we were going to have a Q&A session, and there was a break, and so coffee break, and I'm at the coffee break, and it's very small sole proprietor who lived like an hour away from the major town that we were in this Midwestern state. And he came up to me and he says, "Yeah," he says, "I guess international is important." He said, "But it's not that important to me. And don't put too much emphasis on it, et cetera. And we talked for a little bit, and it was a really cordial conversation. And then he said, I have to leave. I'm not going to be back in for the Q&A session. I have to drive. I live about an hour away from here, and I've got to
Mhm.
go on a conference call with one of my clients who has an issue with a tax issue in China. And I was this field practitioner just told me that he didn't have any interest in China in foreign.
Yeah,
This was like more than a decade ago. And he said, and he was
right.
leaving because he's had to go get on a conference call that was international. So sometimes things are
Exactly.
international than we want to admit.
Yep, we all deal with it. We all deal with it. But talking about what we all deal with and the work environment right now, and something that we're still dealing with after COVID, which you mentioned earlier on. So many firms are still trying to figure out this, whether they're going to be hybrid or in-person work. Where a lot of firms are requesting staff come back to the office. What's your take on the workplace for the profession? And do you think that if an employer puts out a mandate for staff to come in, that it's better for the, even though even if they still make it, if they make it flexible, still make it voluntary, do you think it's really a good idea for folks to show up and be part of that in office experience, because there are other opportunities? I look at it and say that there are opportunities that you might miss out on if you're completely remote or just hybrid only, if you're not in person when everybody else is in the office.
Um, you asked me a question 15, 20 minutes ago about rules and flexibility and creativity. Um, so my answer is I don't believe we ought to have steadfast rules on this. I think every circumstance is different. There's a lot of things happening in the profession with private equity. Some people love it, some people hate it. Alternative firm structures. I've always been one that has said I believe in alternative structures, not a particular one, but the fact that firms ought to be able to try different ones, and we can collectively learn from which ones work well and which ones don't work well. And I would say that here too. I don't think there is a single answer to that environment. Let me give you just three quick stories. People remember stories when you
Okay.
communicate. First, when I started in that firm and I was on the audit side, this was a long time ago, the 40 years ago or so, and the managing partner said, "Look, we want you at client offices all the time. We never want you in an office. Don't ever be in this office." And it
Right.
wasn't virtual meetings, but it was the notion of be out there in the world. My son, I have one son. My son
Hmm.
works in business valuation activities. This was a firm that was 100%. He works for a firm that's 100% virtual. This was pre-COVID. They were 100% virtual. There's
Wow.
partners in different major cities in the country. And they are, he works extremely hard, basically 8 to 5. He's of the generation that or 7:30 to 5, I guess is what he works. And he is loyal to working very hard. I've seen him. I've been in his house, and they team build and stuff virtually, and he's learned a tremendous amount. Does a great job, and the firm does very well. And they're 100% virtual firm. Now that being said, I do think there's some rite of passages in our profession that help you. And I think different parts of our profession, it's different. I think being on an audit team and physically with an audit
Hmm.
team, there's a significant amount of learning that takes place. And that being 100% virtual, I think is hard, not impossible, but you have to be conscious as to how you're going to manage that. I do think team building and learning from others and getting feedback from others, a topic we had before, Arume, um,
Hmm.
being physically together is important as well. Um, I would say that if I believe, based on what I know, me personally, if I was in you starting out, I would probably be one that would be highly hybrid. In other words, there would be sometimes in some places that I would do virtual, but I would be physically present because I think being seen and learning is important. But that's me personally, and that doesn't
Yeah.
someone who doesn't do that can't be can't be successful. Um,
Yeah.
and I know people, they're, not hopefully in our profession, but people cheat on how
Yeah.
much they work and all of that type of stuff virtually. I don't believe people in our profession
Hmm.
really do that. And I think that,
Yeah.
I think you can be productive. I was a CEO, a global CEO. I had direct reports all over the world, right? I was never
Yeah.
really with them. All of our senior
Yeah.
management meetings were virtual. It just depends, and I think it's important to experiment and to dial it and to get it right. And anybody who says 100% every way, only one way, they're probably being not open-minded enough to the facts and circumstances that really drive advancement.
Uh,
And I think there's parts in your career that you got to certainly be more present. And I think you learn a lot in both of those particular. Being self-driven is a hugely important trait in our profession. So you can learn a lot being virtual. So learn
Absolutely.
a lot being,
Yeah.
across with somebody. So
I think I agree with you on that, Barry. So I think we're coming up to top of the hour, but I want to sneak in two more questions. One, you spoke about the fact that there are rules, there's work. I know you've done a lot of work. You've led a lot of significant governance changes within the profession, and I think that is making governance and structural changes is something that some firms and associations, CPA associations, are struggling with. So what builds trust when you are trust and engagement, and when a company or an association, they're trying to like make some drastic organizational change, like how is it fundamental? I always think it's one should try and get buy-in from a lot of your stakeholders, right? Whereas some folks bring organizational change from top down. Like, what's your view in that when you're trying to bring out make successful organizational changes, governance changes?
you better have a passion about it. You better communicate the why relatively simply. You have to be able to admit when you don't have all the answers or don't know the answer to something that comes up. And when something is drastically wrong, you have to be able to find ways to make something better and make those changes. I think it's all of that. I think that's all of that from a change management perspective. That builds trust. Those things build trust. And it's not automatic. Just flip a switch, do those four things, and you have trust. But doing that consistently over a long period of time, then you have trust. And I think that is really a testament to a leader if they can do that.
I think that's right on the money. Thank you for that. So, as we wind up, there are lots of questions in the chat that unfortunately I don't think we're going to get to, but I do want to wrap up, and then I'll let you close out with one of those questions in the chat if you're so inclined. But I like to do this round robin of questions, five short questions, and it's just like, tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Not a lengthy answer, just the first thing that comes to your mind. This is a spin on one of my favorite interviewers. His name was James Lipton. He was an actor. He had the actor studio. What's your favorite word, Barry?
Passion.
Passion. Love that. Mine is yes. What's your least favorite word?
Can't.
Ah, I love that. Mine is no. Don't say I can. You can do. You always find a way. What was the last movie you saw?
I went to the movie with my wife, and I don't even remember the name of it.
What was it about?
It's with the guy who played Elvis, and it's about a very crime-ridden deal and set in New York City. So I don't usually watch movies. I never watch movies on planes, but that's the one I went to. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. The last movie I watched was on a plane. I saw the James Brown musical that was, I think it was Chadwick Boswick that acted in it. That was it. What was the last book you read?
I'm in the midst of reading a book. It's about how you change as you get older, how your perspective on things changes. And one of the firm CEOs gave it to me, and I'm going to hopefully finish it on this trip that I'm getting ready to take.
Okay, that's a good one. For me, I wouldn't say it's a book. It's the latest edition of the CPA Journal. It's a more technical book, but that's what I'm currently reading. And then the last one: what profession other than yours, if you were to do it all over again, would you have liked to be in if you were not an accountant and a CPA?
If I wasn't, I'd have probably been in politics in a certain way, trying to make systemic changes for society as a whole.
Oh, I can see you there advocating for society. So I really appreciate that. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today, Barry?
Just it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for all your hard work. And I would say that people online today, that it's a great profession. You and I talked about that today, and the reason why it is because of the men and women in our profession and their trustworthiness and their conscientiousness and all of the things that happen. And so everyone listening, you have a part to play in make sure that is the same in the future.
Thank you very much for that, Barry. That brings us to the end of today's fireside chat. So if you found the conversation valuable, make sure you share your favorite takeaways in the comments. Connect with Barry and me on LinkedIn. Sorry if we did not get to your questions, but connect with us and we can keep the conversation going. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If there is a leader in the profession that you'd like to hear from next, drop their name in the comments or send me a message directly, and I'll work to make it happen. Thank